we're just thinking about you, and we're hoping everybody's well, and we're keeping well, and we're all standing strong. We're looking forward to seeing you all. And I just can't wait that we come together again just to get onto the praising the Lord and our prayer time together in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you.
The tomb where soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. And our God has robbed the grave. Your name is victory. And all praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. And all praise will rise to Christ our King. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, you're healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, you're turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, you're mending every heart. And I worship you. I worship you, Lord. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. don't see it, you're working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, 'cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, 'cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. Oh, Jesus. Oh, we want more of you. Oh, we need more of you. That is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, Jesus.
Hello, good morning. I'm excited to share with you this morning. Willem had asked if I wanted to share for 2 Sundays, so I've been looking at what I was going to share about, and I really enjoyed what Willem was talking about previously about the quote of Joseph, the multicolorful quote, and where he put on that identity that his father gave him and walked in that. So I thought, let me just go on and talk more about Joseph. And then also I thought, let me talk about the other brother. Let's talk about Judah. So one Sunday I will talk about Joseph, and the other Sunday, this Sunday, I will talk about Judah and go more in depth into that, because there's an incredible development in Judah's life. So I want to go back to the very beginning of Jacob's story, where he flees to his uncle Laban, and there he meets Rachel and he falls in love and he wants to marry her, and Laban says, you work 7 years and then you can marry her. And then on his wedding night, or the next morning, he wakes up and he discovers that Laban has deceived him and has given him Leah instead of Rachel, and then he has to work another 7 years for Rachel. So he does all of that. So in the story you see that Leah gives birth to 4 boys, and the 4th boy is Judah. And at that point she says, and now my soul will praise the Lord. Yeah? And she rejoices in the Lord, and that is Judah. And then she stops conceiving. And then Rachel says to Jacob, why don't you take my maidservant and have kids through her for me? So he does that, and then Leah thinks, okay, here's my maidservant. So then he has 2 more children. So he had 4, then he has 2 more, then he has 2 more with the other maidservant. And then it says, and then Leah started conceiving again, and she has 2 more boys, and she has a girl. So after all those children, that is when Rachel conceives, and she has Joseph. And why I want to point that out really is that the dynamics in that family, and the dynamics between the boys and their attitudes in their hearts, and the attitudes that we later on see, were already formed years and years and years before Joseph came on the scene. And all their jealousy and their strife, their backstabbing, their mercilessness, their coldness of heart, all was well developed before Joseph even arrived. And those boys grew up with a godly father who taught them, really pointed them clearly in the direction of the Lord. It was an incredible promise of Abraham that was spoken out over their life. You know, that when God says to Abraham, look at all the stars, can you count them? And Abraham looks up, and here he is, he's an old man with an old wife, and he has no children, and God says, look at all the stars, can you count them? And he looks up and he says, no, I can't. And God says, your descendants will be more numerous than the stars that you can see here tonight. So, and he has 1 child with Sarah, and that is Isaac. And Isaac and Rebecca have years of trouble before she conceives, and then she has 1 pregnancy, the twins Esau and Jacob. And then Jacob has at this point, those first 10 boys, he has 10 boys. So now you start to see kind of, wow, Jacob must have thought, ooh, the prophecy of the descendants will be as numerous as the stars is starting to, become still very far off, but it's starting to become a little bit more, it looks like we're gonna maybe be a big nation. But somehow that message sort of gets lost in translation, because when you look at Judah's life and how the boys are, they're not really living in that reality, that destiny that has been spoken over them. And there is a lot of strife. Now the strife might have come from the mothers that were competing for Jacob's love and his attention and his affection, and the jealousy of how many kids do you have, and you're barren and I have more, and he's, and this striving of now he will finally love me, and all of that going on. Anyways, there's a lot of strife among the boys. And then Joseph arrives, and Joseph is, when you look later on in his life, he is so far above average. He's an incredible guy, incredibly gifted, and he's also very good looking, it says, and he's just a wonderful person. Now the boys are getting very, very jealous of Joseph, but that jealousy was already there. And their hatred gets deeper and deeper. Joseph has dreams of that look like, that clearly show that his brothers will bow down to him. And even though the reality of that dream is a picture of redemption, but for them, in the mindset where they're at, they see that picture as a threat. He will rule over us. They don't see the beauty really of that picture. It was an incredible picture. So their hatred is very intense. So when they are going out to tend to their sheep for long periods of time, and Jacob says to Joseph, would you go over and check on them? Because at this point they're going to Shechem, and in Shechem, years before that, they killed all the men in the town because of Dinah, their sister, had been dishonored, and they killed everybody in this particular town. So I'm sure Jacob was very nervous about his sons going back in that area, and he sends Joseph over to see if his brothers are alright. And in that you even see the love and the concern Jacob had for his sons. He did love his sons. But they see Joseph coming and they say, oh, there is that dreamer, let's kill him. Then Reuben says, no, let's just put him in the pit, thinking I'm going to rescue him tonight and then I'm going to bring the boy back. But while he's in the pit, this caravan of Ishmaelites, is it Ishmaelites? No, anyways, they were traveling merchants. And Judah says, let's sell him. Yeah, that is Judah's idea. What is a terrible, absolutely unthinkable thing to do. Horrendous. And they agree and they sell Joseph. And later on, when you look at when they are visiting Joseph so many years later, and they're talking among themselves, Joseph can overhear them saying, oh no, Joseph's blood has come back now on our heads because we didn't listen to his pleading and his absolute despair and his fear when he was being sold, and we just, so that must have been a terrible scene, absolutely heartbreaking, terrible thing. And they did that to Joseph, and Joseph ends up in Egypt. Now you have to go back to your father and make up some bogus story about, a wild animal tearing this boy apart. And now the true horror comes, because now you have to live with your grieving father, whose life you actually have destroyed. They didn't intend to destroy their father's life, but it is absolutely an awful situation. And what does Judah do? Judah thinks, I'm out of here, and he goes to another area, away from his father, away from his family. He meets a guy that he clicks. There's a lifelong friendship with this guy, or lifelong, very long time. You see this guy coming back in the story, and there he starts his life. So he meets a girl and he gets married, and he has this happily ever after picture, and he has children with her, and he can leave that whole horrible chapter of selling his brother and breaking his father's heart behind. Now Reuben, on the other hand, has to play a part. He knows full well what has happened. He never wanted this to happen, and everybody has to play the part of, oh, Joseph has been eaten by wild animals. It's a really very difficult situation, really nasty. So now we fast forward. So the reason why that story of Judah is in the middle of the story of Joseph is because there's the two brothers. So you have, on the one hand, you have Joseph, he's being sold, and that is a whole line of a story. And then at the very same time, you have Judah. So these are the two stories that are going side by side, parallel. So while Joseph is doing his time with Potiphar, and Judah is now living this part of life. So that's now where we're looking at that, because those stories are totally parallel at the same timeline. So there's Judah, and he has now 3 sons. So his oldest son was evil. He was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now this boy has been reared by Judah, but somehow Judah's heritage in his faith has not really taken root in his oldest son's life, and that young man dies, and then Tamar is being given to the second boy. Now that is a particular law, but the way it is written there, I have not studied this deeply. This is only just my own thinking, my own reasoning. But looking at that, I actually think that came from Judah, that was not a custom that was done among the Canaanites at all. I really think that came down from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and now to Judah, where you have this law where the widow is then given to the second son, who will produce an offspring. That son will not be the second son's child, that will count to the oldest that has died, so that his family name will stay alive. So the second son absolutely disregards, has no respect for that, and he takes the mickey out of the whole situation, and with doing that he disrespects his late brother, who only just died recently, by not giving his brother an heir. He's disrespecting his father by not giving his father a grandchild to his son that has just passed away, and that will be a bloodline. And he disrespects Tamar, has absolutely no respect for her at all. Plus it also means that if she died, if she would be old, that there would be no family for her to look after her when she's old and frail. So he is very, very wrong by disregarding this custom. And anyways, he dies as well. And then now we see that what Judah does next, because Tamar belongs to Judah's family, and Judah does not take responsibility for Tamar at all. He might be afraid. He might be afraid that Tamar actually is bringing bad luck to the family. So he sends her back to her own family. But it's not the right thing to do at all. He should have looked after her because she was part of his family. But he sends her back and he says, now when my youngest son is the marriage age, then you can marry him. So she goes back to her parents, and then when that youngest boy reaches the age to get married, she sees that she's not being given as a bride to him, and now she starts to plot another plan. Now in all of that is, what I see in all of this is a similarity with Ruth, because Ruth lived with Naomi, and while she was living under the roof of Naomi and under the shelter of that family, she learned so much about the Creator, about God, that when her father-in-law, her husband and her brother-in-law all die, she says to Naomi, no, I will not go back to my parents. I will go with you, and your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And in Tamar you see a very similar attitude. She has really listened to Judah about this custom, about the Redeemer and being redeemed, and the bloodline, and keeping the name of your husband and family name alive. And she has taken this beautiful law very much to heart, very much so, and walks in that. And her name seemingly means upright, standing upright, and she's standing very strong in that. And she concocts this incredible daring plan where she puts down her garment of widowhood and she dresses up like a prostitute and hides, on the side of the road where Judah now is passing to go to a sheep shearing fest. And it says, I understand what I read in my translation that it was his daughter that died, but every sermon that I have read on this says that his wife had died. Now yeah, whoever it is, a very prominent person in his life has died and he's mourning. And so in his deep mourning, so he's now lost two sons, and now he's either lost his daughter or he's lost his wife. He's a very heartbroken man, and he goes to this sheep shearing fest with that best friend that he had met maybe 20 years prior, or whenever it was, or 30, whatever it is, that same guy. And now he sees Tamar thinking she is a prostitute, and he goes over and he wants to have an encounter with her. And she says, what will you pay me? He says, well, would you like a goat? Yes, she says. And then she says, can I have a pledge? And she takes his ring, his cord and his staff, what were very significant IDs. So he sleeps with Tamar, and then she packs up her stuff and goes back and says she puts down those clothing and she puts her widow garments back on again. And Judah finishes with the sheep shearing and goes back home, and he gives his friend, his best friend, the goat, quickly get my stuff back, my IDs back. And his friend goes over there, and nobody has ever heard of this girl that seemingly works there. No, nobody has heard of her, and no. So he goes back, and Judah says, no, it's too embarrassing that I've lost all of this stuff, so we'll just keep it quiet. And 3 months later, Tamar is found out that she's pregnant. And Judah says, bring her out and let's burn her. And what an awful, absolutely awful thing that can come out of somebody's mouth, that you would do that. And you think, can you actually nearly see in his mind kind of, oh, this girl, ever since she came into the family, it's nothing but disaster. Let's get rid of her. burn this girl. Look, she's no good, up to no good, and this is an easy way to get rid of her. But when she's being dragged out, she produces those 3 items, and she says, can you give this to Judah and let him examine those, and whoever those things belong to, they are the father of the child I'm carrying. So then when Judah sees the items and he realizes that he is the father of the child, at that very moment, this is actually the moment of his, this is the biggest milestone in Judah's life, and it is like lightning has hit him. And at this point, he looks at Tamar and he says, you are more righteous than I am. I should have given you, I was wrong not giving you my youngest son. Now, he has become the redeemer, yeah? But what you can see is that Tamar allowed him to move back in that role of godliness and of providing a bloodline and providing a redeemer for his family name. And even though he redeemed her, I think she redeemed him in a sense as well. And he from that moment on, you see an entirely different man. He is entirely changed. The old Judah, up until that point, is aimless, full of strife, jealousy, hatred, mercilessness, has absolutely no picture of himself in God's big plan. He marries, a foreign woman that was totally not according to the family tradition at all, but he does that, meaning, I don't care what happens to my bloodline. I have no part in Abraham's, the covenant that God made with Abraham. He doesn't see himself at all in the picture. But when Tamar steps in and kind of, you will redeem me, you will be the gentleman that you should be. Now, it is done in a very unorthodox way, but, and that's not really what I want to talk about. I just want to talk about the fact that she did not allow him to go off and be nothing. Kind of, no, you will be the redeemer that you ought to be, and we will continue this family line. And after that, you see that he goes back to Jacob, to his own father, and he lives there with Tamar and the boys and the twins. Actually, it turns out that they're twins. Now, another little thing that I never heard, but I only, because I was researching it, I came across it, and I haven't studied it deeply, but it was very interesting, was when those boys were in her womb and they were tumbling an awful lot, and she said, gosh, it is like as if they're fighting. And I think there was a prophetic word about 2 nations or something. But anyways, when the one boy comes out, only his hand comes out, and the midwife ties a little scarlet thread around his wrist, and then the arm goes back in, and then the next baby comes out, and she says, wow, how did you break through? How did you do that? And so the firstborn, the second boy is actually the firstborn. Now, the second boy that broke through is called Phares or Paris, and the other one is Zerah, I think. But anyways, what this person was bringing out was that it was actually a picture of the first Adam. It was just that little hand that came out, and then the second Adam that burst through and has redeemed us, and that first, the boy that broke through, he is in the family line of Jesus, in the Messiah. That is that second baby that broke through, and that this other person that was preaching that was bringing out, saying there's actually a picture of the second Adam that came to set us free. So anyways, when you see all of that, and now when you now go to Judah and you follow Judah, now Judah goes, we're now talking, the famine is happening, so there must have been years of plenty, and now there's the famine, and they are going to Egypt, and they're buying the grain, and Joseph spots them. It must have been amazing to hear his own language, to see all his brothers, to hear what they're saying, and the money goes back into the sacks. And when they get back home, to their big fright and horror, do they see that the bags of money are put on top of all the grain. And they've also spoken with Joseph, and Joseph has been, getting information out of them. Oh, is your father still alive? Do you have more brothers? And they're telling him about Benjamin, and they tell about that their father is still alive. And he has a strange amount of interest in them. So then when they go back, he says, don't come back unless you bring your youngest brother with you. You don't even have to come here. And he takes Simeon as a pledge and puts Simeon in prison. And then when they go back then to Jacob, and Jacob is just absolutely horrified that he has to give up Benjamin, to just let Benjamin go over to Egypt. And when you read there, it says, oh, if I've lost already one son, now I've lost Simeon, and now I will also maybe lose Benjamin. But you can see that he is really mourning Simeon. He loved his sons, yeah? He did really love all his sons. And he is he's really mourning the loss of Simeon, who is now stuck in a prison in Egypt. So anyways, Reuben says to his father a very strange thing. He says, I'll make sure Benjamin is safe, and if Benjamin dies, you can kill 2 of my sons. And you think, what grandfather would ever want to kill 2 grandsons as a revenge? Jacob doesn't even, doesn't seem to act on that or want to act on that at all. Then Judah steps in when it is time for them to go back, because all the food is finished, and Judah says, Father, I will go, and I promise with my life that I will bring Benjamin back, and if I don't bring him back, you can put all the blame on me, but he says, I will lay down my life for him if I have to. So they go there, and now Joseph sees them and he sees Benjamin. But one of the things that he wants to test him with at some point, so yeah, okay, they arrive and they are being brought to his house for a meal. His father Jacob has said, oh, bring a gift for the big man, for this important man, and a little bit of balm and a little bit of honey and almonds and pistachio nuts. And I think for Joseph to see that little touch of home must have really touched his heart. When you know your parents, or oh yeah, your mother she would always put this in your bag, or and there he is, and it must have really touched Joseph's heart to see the gift. Anyways, he puts all his brothers in line of age, and the brothers have to sit in one table, and the Egyptians have to sit on another table, because they are so far below them. The Egyptians couldn't mingle with the Hebrews, and then Joseph is sitting separately. And Benjamin gets 5 times more food than everybody else, and they give all the money back, and they are pleading, oh, sorry, we didn't mean that money, and here is the money back, and we have extra money. And then they go home, and Joseph says to his steward, now I want you to put all the money back and a silver cup in Benjamin's sack. So they go off, and then the Egyptians chase after them, and they say, stop, you've stolen the silver cup. They search through the bags, and the brothers said, whoever you find that cup in, you can kill that person. We have definitely, they are so convinced that nobody would have done such a horrible thing as stealing a silver cup from this incredible man after this incredible meal. And then it turns out it was Benjamin. And it's absolute horror of horrors. There could not have been worse than that. And they all go back. This is the nightmare of all nightmares has started, and they're totally at the mercy of this big official person. And when they get there, they all say, oh, you take all of us and let him go. No, Joseph says, you didn't steal anything. It's only this person that stole something, so he will stay here and you can all go home. It's even worse. It's even worse. Going back home and facing your father, and now the last son is gone. Like, you would rather be left in Egypt than having to be the bearer of bad news like that and live with the consequences. Terrible. And then Judah steps up and he takes Joseph aside, and he gives a very long speech explaining everything, and he says, you take me, my father would not survive losing this boy. He also says, my father's life is totally caught up in this young boy's life, young man. And I think even for Benjamin to have that level of that your father is so entangled in your whole life must have been quite some burden actually to carry. But there's Judah, an entirely changed man. And the other thing that Joseph actually is at that point hammering down on is, I want to see if you're honest man. And of course those men have quite an image of being deceitful, throughout all their generations. But Joseph sees them differently. He says he wants to test them. I want to see that you're honest men, because they are honest men. That deceitfulness, that is not their true identity. And Joseph is really bringing that out. I want to see that you're honest men. And they are. They give back the money and they, they do everything, and they have actually grown so much in honesty and in integrity. What was actually probably always there, but was so overshadowed by the rivalry, the jealousy and the hatred. But here it is coming up. And when Judah, the brother who sold Joseph, the least merciful guy, and after he has led his other, parallel life to Joseph, he is such a changed man. He says, you take me, I will be your slave, and you can take. Now Judah has those twins back home. It's not as if Judah is an unattached man that could just do that. It is a huge thing that what Judah says here. And at that point Joseph breaks down and he tells everybody to leave, and then he wails and he cries and he says, guys, it is me, it is Joseph. Now the guys are terrified. But Joseph says, I have forgiven you. He forgave them years ago. He absolutely forgave them, and he's so delighted and he's celebrating. The guys are absolutely shaking with so much fear, cannot grasp that level of forgiveness. And you see later on in the story that is still an issue after Jacob dies, that still they actually have not trusted Joseph, that he actually had forgiven them. But he really had set those guys free, entirely free from their guilt. So that is the story of Judah, and the absolute change in Judah once he saw his true place in the family, and that he was part of that Abrahamic, covenant, of that picture of your descendants will be as numerous. And Tamar has sort of lifted him out of that pagan Canaanite, just mingle with, because she was a girl that had the same attitude as Ruth, that your people will be my people and your God will be my God. And she had listened to Judah. And when you think of it, that Judah was not walking the talk. He was talking, but was not walking the talk. But Tamar listened to the talk and really took it to heart. And she became the mother of the twins, but she's named in the genealogy of the Messiah. That is powerful, absolutely powerful. So that is today's story about Judah. And then next week I would like to share about Joseph.